I thought I needed to be ready first, but she was willing to build with me. I let her go. Now I have everything except the one person who loved me when I had nothing. Before we begin, please like, subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. Let's all be internet friends. Hi, I'm Grant, and I often wonder why we assume that love should wait until we've arrived. My father used to say, don't aim for perfect before you commit, aim for real. I thought he didn't understand. Now I know better. I hope you learn from my story. All right, let's dive in, and please do not forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this story. I was standing in my apartment, sleek marble floors, backlit liquor shelves, a view of the city that most people only dream of. I had everything, the kind of life people posted about. I had just gotten off a video call with a woman who looked like a magazine ad, expensive hair, perfectly contoured cheekbones, the kind who laughed at all the right moments. She said I was refreshing. I said she was captivating. We both lied. She ended the call with a kiss blown through the screen and said, maybe dinner next week. I said I'd check my calendar. I never did. I didn't have to. I already knew I wouldn't feel anything, just like the last 4 dates, just like the ones before that. As the silence took over, I heard my father's voice from a memory that never faded. He wasn't the type to lecture, just said things once and waited for life to teach you what he already knew. I started small with your mother, he said once, wiping grease off his hands in the driveway. 1 room, 1 mattress. 2 dreams, that's why it lasted. At the time, I nodded like I understood. I didn't. Back then, I thought love had to come after the money, after the house, after the suits and dinners and speaking engagements. I told myself I needed to be ready first, that she deserved the best version of me, the version I hadn't become yet. I believed it, or at least I needed to. Because if I didn't, I would have had to face the fact that I just didn't want to do the work then. I walked past the kitchen. Granite counters, wine fridge, 2 air fryers, but not a single memory made here. Not with her, not with anyone. I thought of Isabel, the way she'd dance while stirring pasta, her voice humming nonsense songs off-key, the way she filled small spaces with big warmth. I used to think success would dull the ache. That once I had enough, the loneliness would stop feeling like failure. But it didn't, it echoed, and the worst part, I had no one to blame but myself. She wasn't flashy. Isabel wore thrifted sweaters and kept her phone screen cracked for months before replacing it. But when she looked at me, it felt like she saw through the layers I hadn't even peeled back myself. We met in our early 20s, me with a head full of ambition and her with arms wide open, ready to build a life out of whatever we could afford. I still remember the night she brought it up. We were sitting on the floor of my studio apartment eating takeout. No table, no couch, just 2 mismatched cushions and a candle she'd stuck in an empty pasta jar. You know, she said between bites, we could do this. Build something doesn't have to be fancy, just has to be ours. I laughed, not unkindly, but in that way men laugh when they're scared and don't want to admit it. I'm not there yet, I said. You deserve more than this. She blinked at me, then smiled. This is already more than I've had. I'm not afraid of starting small, are you? I shrugged, leaned back against the wall, and looked away. I just want to be ready. I want to give you everything, not cracked tiles and ramen on the floor. She didn't argue, she just nodded, slow and quiet, like she already knew I wasn't going to choose her then. She said, you think love comes after the arrival. But I'd rather build than wait. That night I kissed her like I meant forever, but held her like I was afraid of it. And the thing is, I really did want forever, just on my terms, when I was impressive enough. When I felt like someone who deserved a woman like her. Every time she brought it up, living together, saving for a car, maybe adopting a dog, I told her the same thing. Not yet, be patient, you'll thank me later. And every time her smile got a little smaller, her laugh didn't come as quickly. She stopped saying, I believe in you, out loud. But I still saw it in her eyes, that flicker of faith, waiting for me to grow up. But I didn't grow, I just got busier, hungrier for more. I told myself it was for us, even as I kept pushing her to the outskirts of my life. Until one day she stopped standing there. She didn't cry, didn't slam the door, didn't call me names or accuse me of wasting her time. She just stood in my doorway holding a small box of the things she kept at my place, her favorite mug, the blanket she brought from college, a half-used bottle of lotion I always pretended not to like the smell of. She didn't even ask me to help her carry it. I can't keep showing up for someone who's still deciding if I'm worth building with, she said softly, like anything louder would snap what was already breaking between us. I told you I'm just not ready yet, I replied like I had every other time. I said it slower this time, like maybe that would make it sound truer. She looked at me with this hollow kind of calm, the kind that only comes after you've cried all your tears in private and made peace with the silence. You've been saying that for 2 years, Grant. I didn't have a defense, just silence, and she didn't wait for me to fill it. "I hope you get everything you're chasing," she said, stepping back into the hallway. "And I hope when you do, it feels like enough." That door clicked shut like punctuation, like the kind you don't erase. I stood there for a while, box still in my hands, the blanket still smelling like her. And for a second, a real, ugly second, I felt relief. No more questions, no more pressure, just space, but the space didn't feel free. It felt hollow. In the weeks that followed, I buried myself in work. I picked up extra projects, chased clients, networked like my life depended on it. I told myself I'd circle back once I was someone, once I could offer her something real. But what I didn't understand then, what I was too arrogant, too ambitious to realize, was that Isabel never needed the finished product. She loved the draft. She showed up for the man still becoming. And I let her go because I thought ready meant polished, not present. I thought love was something you unlock once you hit all your milestones. Instead, I stood there watching the only person who ever truly believed in me walk away, while I stood still, arms too empty, ego too full. Success didn't hit me like a thunderclap. It crept in gradually, a better office, sleeker suits, handshakes that lingered longer at networking events. My name started to mean something. I started getting invited to places I once thought were out of reach. Penthouse rooftops, panels, business brunches where the check never landed in front of me. And every time I had a win, every time I signed a new deal or saw my name in a press release, I thought of her. Not the way you'd think, not like a grand romantic gesture, not with longing music behind it. It was quieter than that, like a dull ache in the middle of a celebration. I'd picture her face, the way it lit up when I got my first freelance client, the way she pulled me into that awkward dance when I landed my first bonus check. She made milestones feel like home. Without her, they just felt like check marks. I kept telling myself it would all be worth it, that one day I'd reach out and have more to offer her, a real apartment, not just a dream, a stable salary, not just potential. A life she wouldn't have to help me build, something that didn't ask anything of her, but with every new piece of success she felt further away. And the silence between us grew louder. I started dating again. Women who didn't know me before the articles, before the tailored coats and expensive watches. They liked my restaurant choices, complimented my view, asked about my next move. But none of them asked about the night terrors I sometimes got when I worked too hard, or how I liked my eggs, or why I left art school. I remember one of them, Harper, gorgeous, sharp, always dressed like a magazine cover. We had dinner at a place with candles on the floor and oysters I could finally pronounce. Mid-conversation, she glanced around my apartment and laughed. "You ever live somewhere with less than 2 bathrooms?" I didn't respond right away, because my mind had already gone back to a crack-tiled bathroom in a 1-bedroom apartment with a broken cabinet Isabel patched with duct tape and sticker decals. She called it character. I called it temporary. And now I couldn't remember why that was supposed to be a bad thing. Harper asked another question, something about whether I invested in crypto, and I just nodded along. But inside I was somewhere else. Somewhere barefoot in a tiny kitchen. Somewhere quieter, somewhere I thought I'd get back to eventually. She walked away on a Sunday. There was no storming out, no shouting match, no final desperate plea. Just a quiet folding of laundry, her favorite green mug placed gently on the counter, and a soft exhale that I didn't recognize as final until days later. She said my name once, just once, and it sounded like someone giving something back that never really belonged to them. "I can't wait forever, Grant." I remember blinking, confused. We hadn't fought. We hadn't even really talked that morning. But maybe that was the point. Maybe the silence between us had grown too wide to cross, and I just hadn't noticed until she was already packing her books into that old canvas bag. She didn't take everything. Just the things she came with, the stories, the photos of her parents, the plants she'd nursed back to life after I forgot to water them, and her belief in me. She took that too, though I didn't realize it was gone until the first time I celebrated something and had no one to call. I let her go because I thought there would always be time. I told myself I'd reach back when I had more to offer, that I couldn't build with her because I needed to build first. I needed to become the man I thought she deserved. But here's the thing I didn't understand then. The man she deserved wasn't some future version of me wearing a watch that cost more than rent. It was the man who cooked with her on rainy nights and held her hand when the job interviews went south. It was the man who showed up, not the man who waited to be perfect. I stayed in the apartment for a while, thinking maybe she'd come back. That maybe she'd miss me enough to knock on the door again. But weeks passed. Her name faded from the mail slot. The last of her basil plant withered in the window, and I started climbing. Because if I couldn't fix the past, I could at least outpace the ache. Promotions, networking mixers, sleek offices with big glass doors and a corner desk that overlooked half the city. I started becoming the man I thought I needed to be: polished, sharp, well-spoken. My business card gleamed, my social feeds sparkled. But every time I reached a new milestone, I looked around and found myself alone in it. Surrounded by noise but no echo of her laugh. Success came, it just didn't bring her with it. Dating, once a simple dance of possibility, became a parade of polished smiles and curated interest. The first woman I dated after Isabel was everything my old self would have found impressive, fashion-forward, stunning, articulate. Her name was Harper, and she introduced herself at a friend's rooftop party with a champagne glass in one hand and a question about what I drove in the other. It felt like validation at first. We went to the best places, she always dressed the part, and for a while I believed I was finally on the track I'd waited for, the track where love came after success. But Harper never asked about my favorite book. Never laughed at my old stories, the way Isabel used to, doubled over in that tiny kitchen with her hair up in a pencil. Harper never touched anything in my apartment like it belonged to her. She liked the view, not the life. Not me. Other women came and went, always impressed, always interested, but in the version of me I had created. Not the man I had been, not the man who used to dream about splitting rent and watching late-night TV on a broken couch with the woman he loved beside him. And I started to notice something else. None of them ever stayed. They smiled at the dinners, praised the wine, posted the skyline from my balcony. But every conversation felt like a transaction, me offering the performance of a man who had arrived, them offering admiration that didn't reach past the surface. On one particularly bad date, Harper wrinkled her nose at the idea of growing up in a one-bedroom apartment with peeling wallpaper. "Can you imagine?" she laughed, swirling her drink, starting from that. "I'd die." And just like that, I was back in Isabel's old apartment, watching her dance barefoot on the linoleum floor, humming while she stirred something on the stove. We didn't have a dishwasher. The shower pressure was bad. The fridge groaned at night, but it was full of life, full of her. I went home early that night. Harper called me boring. I didn't care. I sat in the silence of my perfectly lit living room, surrounded by everything I had worked for, and felt the emptiest I ever had. That was the first night I typed Isabel's name into my phone. Her number was no longer in my contacts, but I remembered it, muscle memory. I typed it in, hesitated, and hit call. Disconnected. I tried again, this time without the country code. Still nothing. I stared at the screen, the dial tone like static in my chest. Then I opened my messages and scrolled all the way up through old conversations now archived in silence. The last text she ever sent was soft, not bitter, just tired. "Take care of yourself, Grant." I hadn't replied. I searched her on Twitter, Instagram, even LinkedIn. Nothing, no trace, no pictures, no posts, like she had vanished. I dug through old photos and found one of her and Samira, Isabel's best friend back in the day. They had been inseparable for a while until time and distance separated us all. I remembered Samira's sharp wit, the way she always side-eyed me whenever I made excuses about timing. It took me 2 hours to find her on Facebook. I sent a message, short, cautious. "Hi, Samira. I know this is random, but do you know how Isabel's doing?" She replied the next day, "Why?" That was all she wrote. I typed and deleted a dozen times before sending. I was just wondering. I know it's been years. "I hope she's okay." Silence. 2 days passed. Then finally, "She's good, married now, 2 kids, moved to Scotland about 2 years ago, please don't message again." I stared at the message for a long time. Scotland, married, 2 kids. For some reason, I had always assumed I'd find her again, that she'd still be somewhere nearby, still waiting, or at least reachable. I didn't think I'd have to mourn her like this, like someone who had died. Because in a way, she had the version of her who knew me, who loved me, who once saw a future with me. She was gone. She had built something, and I had built something too, just not with her. I went on a date the following weekend, mostly to quiet the ache. Her name was Natalie. She was clever, confident, the kind of woman who never doubted her own worth. She wore a designer blazer over a silk blouse, and when she leaned forward, I could smell rosewater and ambition. We talked about startups, real estate, tech acquisitions. She laughed at my stories, touched my arm when I made a joke. She asked about my net worth before she asked about my favorite book. The conversation was smooth, calculated, like we both knew we were performing. But halfway through the night, she picked up her phone and started scrolling while I was answering a question she'd asked. I paused mid-sentence. She didn't notice. That's when it hit me. I could buy this dinner 10 times over, but I'd never afford her attention the way I once had Isabel's. Back then, we used to talk for hours. She'd ask questions that had nothing to do with my title or salary. She'd curl up on the couch with her knees under her chin, listening like every word I said mattered. She knew my mother's birthday, my favorite cereal. She remembered the story behind my old scar and why I stopped playing football in college. Now all I got were curated compliments and brand calculations. I went home that night and sat in the dark. No music, no TV. Just me and the quiet hum of appliances. I pulled up an old photo, Isabel in our first apartment, barefoot in a t-shirt that didn't belong to her, stirring something on the stove while humming a song she never remembered the lyrics to. We had a crooked table back then. The chairs didn't match. The light in the kitchen flickered every time we turned on the microwave, but she looked happy. I'd never seen anyone look at a tiny kitchen like it was enough. I closed the photo and tried to sleep. My bed felt colder than usual. I'd always told myself I was waiting to be the kind of man she deserved, but maybe she didn't want perfect. Maybe she just wanted real. And maybe I was too scared to be that when it counted. I couldn't let it go. For days, I paced around my apartment like a man stuck between two lives. One I built cold, gleaming, impressive. And one I lost, warm, uneven, unfinished. I didn't want to believe that chapter was fully closed. Not yet. I had to try one last time, so I reached out again, not to Isabel, to Samira. I stared at the message box for what felt like hours before typing. I know you asked me not to message again. I won't after this. I didn't say goodbye right. Please tell her I'm happy for her, and that I'm sorry.
Scene.
No reply, and honestly, I didn't expect one. But later that night I got an email from Samira. Short, clipped. Attached to a photo of Isabel standing in front of a stone cottage, holding a baby boy on her hip, a little girl clinging to her leg. Her husband, tall, dark-haired, quiet confidence in his stance, had one arm around her waist. Her hair was longer, her smile softer. She looked full, rooted, at peace. The email had no words, just the image. I stared at it until my screen dimmed from inactivity. Then I stared longer. I tried to imagine myself there beside her, maybe as the one holding the child or tucking her hair behind her ear. But it felt intrusive, like trying to rewrite a book after it's already been published. That life wasn't mine anymore. It never would be. Still, I read between the lines of that silent image, not regret, not resentment. Just distance, a polite kind of closure. And yet, something in me unraveled, not because she was gone, but because she had been real. And I let her slip away believing she wasn't enough for the man I thought I had to become. Now I had become him, and I didn't like him very much. I opened our old messages the next morning, not out of nostalgia, more like penance. There were dozens, hundreds, even most from her. Some short, made soup, it's in the fridge. Good luck on your pitch. Others longer, reflections about the future, funny things her students said at work, little notes about wanting to travel, to garden, to start small together. What struck me most wasn't what she wrote. It was how much of myself she saw and still stayed. Even when I brushed her off, even when I said, "Now's just not the right time," she didn't beg. She waited with quiet hope. She believed in a version of us that didn't have to be perfect, just present. I read a message she sent on a Wednesday night 2 years ago. "I know you don't want to talk about forever yet, but I just want you to know I'd still choose you if all we ever had was this tiny apartment and a chipped kettle. I'm not waiting for what you'll become. I love who you are now." And I never replied. I had seen that message the day she sent it. I remember reading it and putting my phone face down, telling myself I'd respond when I had something better to offer. I never responded. Now I couldn't stop replying in my head. My thoughts were full of all the things I wished I had said. I kept scrolling, back to our earliest conversations, back to inside jokes I'd forgotten, back to the day she told me I was her safe place. At the time, I thought she was just being dramatic. Looking back now, I think it was the highest compliment she could have given me. I'd made her feel safe and still pushed her away. Now I lived in a place with fingerprint locks and triple-paned glass and doormen who knew my dinner orders by heart. And somehow, I'd never felt more exposed. I went on a few more dates. Women who looked the part, said all the right things, laughed at my stories. They liked my views, my wine, the restaurant I picked. They asked about my work, complimented my ambition, leaned in when I spoke about investments. But no one asked about the stories behind my silence, or why I hesitated before answering certain questions, or why I looked tired even after 8 hours of sleep. They liked my life, not me. One of them, a woman named Elise, told me I had a CEO aura. I smiled. She meant it as a compliment. But I couldn't stop thinking about Isabel sitting on my floor years ago, folding laundry while humming some offbeat tune. She once told me I had a kind way of explaining things. I remember that night like it was yesterday, not because it was grand, but because it was mine, ours. I looked around my penthouse the next morning at the glass, the marble, the curated art on the walls. It was beautiful, it was cold. The stillness was deafening. I made coffee and sat by the window, letting the silence stretch. I didn't open my laptop, I didn't check my calendar, I just sat with it. And for the first time in years, I admitted it to myself. I wasn't missing out on love. I had turned my back on it. I visited my father that weekend. He greeted me with a slow smile and a longer hug. He always had a way of holding you like time didn't matter, like presence was the whole point. We sat on the back porch, the same one I used to run circles around as a kid. He handed me a cup of tea instead of coffee, said I looked tired in a way money couldn't fix. I didn't argue. I told him about Isabel, not in detail, just that I lost her, that she was gone in the way people never come back. He didn't say, "I told you so." Instead, he chuckled, that low, warm sound he made when he was about to tell me something I wouldn't understand until later. "Your mother and I started in a one-room flat," he said. "No bed frame, just a mattress on the floor. We had one frying pan, 2 plates, and a dream we kept adding to." I looked at him, unsure where he was going. "You know what made it work?" he asked. I shrugged. He tapped his chest. "We were both in it, fully, no conditions. No milestones to hit first, just love and the decision to grow." I looked down, heat rising behind my eyes. He didn't pat my back or offer advice. He just sipped his tea and let me sit in the truth, that I didn't lose Isabel because I wasn't ready. I lost her because I believed love had a price tag. I remembered a day when I was 24, broke, overworked, chasing every opportunity like it might disappear. I had just come back from a job interview and Isabel had made pancakes for dinner. She sat on the counter in her sweats, swinging her legs, asking me how it went. I barely answered. I was already searching listings for better-paying jobs. I didn't realize then that she didn't need my next paycheck. She just wanted my attention. That same night my dad had called. He could tell I was distant. And I remembered his exact words now, as clearly as if he were sitting next to me again. "You don't wait until everything's perfect to love someone. You love, and together you make it enough." At the time, I brushed it off. Told him I didn't want to drag someone else through my building phase, that I needed to focus, that she deserved more. He told me she didn't want more, she wanted me. But I thought I was protecting her, when really I was just protecting myself from the fear of failing in front of her. I wanted to come back one day with something to show, with proof that I'd made it. I never realized we could have been the proof, not the money, not the apartment, not the business card with my title embossed in gold. Isabel had offered me something solid, something real. And I traded it for a version of success that felt more like a cage the higher I climbed. I sat in the quiet of my apartment that night, lights dimmed, city skyline glowing in the distance. Everything I thought I needed was in reach. Except her, a few nights later, I sat on my balcony with an old journal Isabel had once given me. The cover was worn leather, and inside she had scribbled little notes on random pages. Things like "You're going to be great someday, and don't forget to celebrate the small wins." I hadn't touched it in years, but flipping through it now, I felt the ghost of a man I used to be, not successful, not polished, just hopeful. The part that haunted me most wasn't that she was gone. It was that she had believed in a version of me I never gave myself time to become. She didn't fall in love with who I was yet. She fell for who I was becoming, and all she asked was to walk beside me. I made her wait at the gate instead. I kept telling myself I'd circle back when I had something real to offer. But the truth was, she was the something real. She was the one constant in a life I kept trying to perfect before I let love in. Now, with all the polish and none of the peace, I realized the cost. I didn't just miss out on Isabel. I missed out on the man I could have become with her, someone softer, more present, less obsessed with control. Someone who didn't equate love with milestones or worth with status. I poured a drink and sat with that truth until the glass was empty and the night was long. The city looked different now. All lights, no warmth. And somewhere far away, across an ocean, maybe in a quiet Scottish town, the woman who once made pancakes in my cramped kitchen was likely folding laundry or reading bedtime stories to the children we never had. Her life had moved on, she had grown into everything she dreamed of, and I had grown too, just in the wrong direction. A few weeks later, I attended a networking event at a luxury hotel downtown. It was one of those Sutan Smile gatherings where no one says what they mean, and everyone acts like they're exactly where they're supposed to be. I'd mastered these rooms by now, the handshake rhythm, the quick laughs, the humble brags. But that night, none of it felt natural. I stood near the bar, sipping a watered-down old-fashioned, when a woman I'd just met turned to me mid-conversation and asked, "So, are you married?" It was a harmless question, light, casual, asked with a curious smile and no real investment behind it, I smiled back, the kind of smile I'd rehearsed for years. Not yet, I said, but inside my chest tightened because I knew the real answer. I had already found the woman I was meant to marry. I just didn't marry her. She had been willing to start with love and build everything else later. She didn't care about rings or titles or matching luxury chairs. She wanted partnership. Roots, she wanted me, and I let her walk away, convinced I needed to be someone else first. That love should come after success, not alongside it. Now, when I looked around at all these polished people in expensive shoes, I didn't see potential. I saw echoes, 1,000 people who knew how to speak the language of success, but none who knew how to hold silence with grace. None who could walk through the hard parts of life without needing everything to be perfectly arranged first. That woman at the bar leaned in, laughing at something someone else said. And just like that, the conversation moved on, but the question lingered. Not yet, not ever. I left early. I didn't bother exchanging numbers or locking in future meetings. I walked out into the night air and let it sting a little. Because if pain was all I had left of Isabel, I wasn't ready to let it go. A few days later, I received an alumni newsletter in my inbox, one I usually ignored. But that day, something pulled me to click. It was a feature story. From local roots to global reach. Isabel Morin's fight for family-led housing in rural communities. Her name alone punched the air out of my lungs, and then came the picture. There she was, radiant, confident. Hair windblown, eyes soft but stronger than I'd ever seen them. She was standing beside a wooden home, cradling a toddler with curls just like hers. A little girl held her other hand, and to her left a man. Tall, warm-eyed, with his arm resting lightly around her waist. The caption read, Isabel Morin with her husband Callum and their children, outside one of the homes their foundation helped rebuild. I didn't even blink. I just stared at the screen like it might change if I looked long enough. But it didn't. She was gone, not just moved on, not just healed, gone. She had rewritten the future I thought we'd still revisit. I'd always imagined I'd call her someday, that I'd show up at her door matured, ready, but now there was no door left to knock on. And the worst part, I was proud of her. Even as my throat closed and something in my chest cracked, I felt it, this deep, almost reverent pride. She'd built the life she deserved, without me. That night I didn't drink, I didn't text anyone. I didn't scroll endlessly or try to distract myself. I just sat in silence with the version of myself she would never meet, the man who had finally made it, and finally understood what ready really meant. It wasn't about the car, or the job, or the status. It was about presence. It was about choosing someone before everything was perfect. It was about her. That night I dreamed of her, not the usual kind, not romantic or nostalgic. It wasn't about the kiss we never got to redo or the trip we never took. It was simpler, softer. In the dream, she was humming in a kitchen that didn't belong to me. The walls were blue, the floor was worn, a kettle steamed in the background. And she was stirring something on the stove, her back to me, saying, "You know, it wouldn't have been perfect, but we would have figured it out." I didn't speak. I just stood there, absorbing her voice like a man who hadn't heard music in years. She turned to face me, calm, clear-eyed. "You didn't have to build it all first. I would have helped." Then I woke up, and it hit me, that was her voice. Not imagined, not embellished her. The real her tone, her rhythm, her words. Not sweetened by time or romanticized by guilt. Just her. I didn't cry. I didn't reach for my phone. I just sat there, staring at the ceiling of my apartment, surrounded by everything I thought I needed, and feeling more hollow than I ever did back when I had nothing but her. Grief has strange timing. It waits until your hands are full to whisper, "You're still empty." And that morning I didn't try to outrun it. Instead, I went for a walk. No watch, no phone. Just the wind and the ache and the quiet truth that sometimes the greatest losses aren't loud. They're patient. They're still. They wait until you're alone with yourself and finally ready to hear them. I didn't try to fill the silence anymore. I used to drown it in noise, meetings, dates, gym sessions, background music I didn't even like. Anything to keep from hearing the echo of what I lost. But after that dream, something shifted. I didn't want to escape the quiet. I wanted to sit with it, understand it, let it teach me. So I started doing little things, not to earn points, not to be seen, but because they felt right. I found Isabel's charity online. I knew she wouldn't see my name on a donor list. That wasn't the point. I gave a monthly gift under anonymous, something steady, something dependable, something I never was. One afternoon, I passed a young couple arguing outside a grocery store. He looked panicked, she looked exhausted, and their toddler was crying. I didn't overthink it. I handed the man a 20 and said, "Get what you need. Take care of her." Then I walked away, fast, before pride or ego could catch up. I started having long talks with my dad again, not about success, not about regrets, just about life. He told me about the leaky ceiling in their first apartment, about how mom used to sweep water off the floor with a kitchen towel and smile through it all. I didn't know we were poor, he said, because she made it feel like we were building something. That sentence stayed with me, because that's what Isabel tried to do with me. She didn't care that my car stalled every other week or that our dates were mostly takeout and walking loops around the park. She believed in the building, in me, and now with everything built I realized I'd become the kind of man who once looked down on beginnings, so I stopped performing. I stopped leading with my resume, my title, my success story. I let myself be just Grant, the man who forgot how to laugh with his chest, the man who's learning how to give without expecting applause, the man who finally understood that ready wasn't about having it all. It was about being open enough to share whatever you had, even if it was just a dream and a memory of someone who once believed in you more than you believed in yourself. I don't go to the high-rise lounges anymore. I stopped wearing the suit on weekends. I don't check my reflection as much. And when someone asks what I do for a living, I just say, enough. Because that's what Isabel used to say, that love isn't about climbing ladders, it's about finding someone who makes the ground beneath your feet feel solid. These days I find myself in places she would have liked. A quiet cafe on 8th Street, where the barista remembers names and adds little hearts on the paper cups. A used bookstore that smells like paper and rain, where the owner talks about authors like they're old friends. I sit, I read, I listen. I don't reach for my phone when I'm alone. I let the silence say something. I think about Isabel more gently now, not with regret that aches, but with a kind of reverence. Like she was a chapter in my life that I tried to skip ahead from, only to realize it held everything that mattered. I don't romanticize it. We had our flaws, our fights, our slow stretches, but we also had quiet joy. We had vision. We had trust, which is rarer than chemistry and more fragile than ambition. Sometimes I see couples and wonder what she looks like when she laughs now. If she still wrinkles her nose, if her son has her eyes, if her husband, the man who stood beside her in that newsletter photo, kisses her forehead the way I always meant to but didn't. I've stopped performing. There's a difference between being liked and being known, and I chased the former so hard I forgot what the latter felt like. Isabel knew me, knew my doubts, my smallness, my hesitation, and still chose to believe in me. I thought I needed to prove something before I could be loved that deeply, but she never asked for proof, just presence. Now, when people say they're waiting to be ready for love, I want to shake them. Ready is a myth we invent to protect our pride. I wasn't building a future. I was building a shield. And by the time I lowered it, she'd already built something real without me. The world looks different when you stop seeing people as audiences. I make eye contact longer. I ask follow-up questions. I sit with stories instead of moving to the next one. I'm not trying to earn anyone's admiration anymore. I'm just trying to be someone worth coming home to, even if no one's waiting. I don't know what made me do it. Maybe it was the quiet. Maybe it was the way the night wrapped itself around me with no one to call, no hand reaching for mine. I opened my laptop, clicked on a blank document, and started writing. Not for work, not for the world, just for her, for Isabel. I didn't say I miss you. That felt too small. I didn't beg. That would have been dishonest. Instead, I told her the truth. I wrote, "You loved me when I didn't even know how to love myself. You saw a version of me that hadn't been shaped by titles or accolades. You offered your hand, your heart, and your hope when all I had was a cracked dream and a chip on my shoulder." I told her how I used to think love had a prerequisite, that I needed to arrive before I could open the door for someone else. But now, sitting in the echo of everything I thought I wanted, I understood, arriving isn't what builds a home. Building is. I remembered the night we split, how quiet she was, how steady. She didn't cry, she didn't rage, she just let go. And somehow that haunted me more than any tear could have. Because when someone who believed in you stops fighting, you realize they were never trying to control you, they were trying to grow with you. I kept writing. You were right. We could have built something. You were willing. I wasn't. And now I understand that ready doesn't mean rich or respected or revered. It means being brave enough to start with someone and not needing a perfect plan. I ended it simply. I hope he loves you the way I should have, and I hope your children see the kind of strength I took for granted. You were the foundation, I was the fear, and you were right to walk away. I never sent it. Just printed it out and folded it neatly. I tucked it between the pages of the old journal Isabel once gave me, the one I never wrote in because I said I was too busy. Now it's the only place I let myself tell the truth. I sat back, closed my eyes, and breathed. The city buzzed outside, but in that moment I felt something different, not regret, not pain, something closer to grace. Because maybe this quiet acceptance is what love really looks like when it's no longer reaching backward. Maybe this is what it means to finally be ready. Thank you so much for watching. Please do not forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. One love.